Drop a message in text chat and keep it friendly. Drop a message in text chat and keep it friendly.
About, hey, we're expecting Sky and Scroll to do good. Hold on a minute, Pablo and Chino may be doing a bit better than we all expected them to do. I wonder why that is. And you look at the zones and you start to think, they had a bit of an easier day, you could argue.
Yeah, especially with this new surge, it makes it a lot easier to actually play your game when the zone does pull right where your drop spot is. In Pablo and Chino's case, that is exactly true. You can see exactly where they land just there at in the sort of middle of those three circles, and it's going to make it a lot easier, right? Let's not discredit what they've done. They did an amazing job yesterday, but it does make it a lot easier. And the one game that they didn't do so great was that game 3 you can see up there in the top left of the screen. That was their bad game. So it's going to be interesting to see what they can do today. But I think it almost highlights how good Sky and Scroll did yesterday as well, because they were dropping, and of course Thomas and Focus, they are so far away from where these zones fall. So yes, it was great for Chino and Pablo. Yes, it was great for Size and Scary, but I think it almost makes it greater for Sky and Scroll, almost amplifies their achievement.
I mean, you can't act like this isn't what we expected from Sky and Scroll. That was the one factor we all said was to their, positive. I mean, they are the consistent team. No matter what you put in front of them as far as zone, positioning, they always seem to find the right solution. And I think that is a large part of why, yes, they are our first place team. And it's why I feel confident saying I think they will continue to be our first place team with the rest of the game today. Because now what happens if they do get a couple more zones, right? Like, what happens when they get their easy games, quote unquote? I think these guys are really spectacular.
Yeah, they really were. They were clutching up as duos. We had some solo clutches as well. They played their consistent game. And when I went back and watched a lot of their games from yesterday, in every single one of their games, they were staying so far back in the Storm. They were staying in Storm sort of that 4th, 5th zone transition. And in every single game, they were just skipping all of that mid-game. They weren't getting involved in those mid-game fights. They weren't losing damage critically in those mid-game fights as well. They were staying so far back in the Storm. So if we're watching them today, which I imagine we will be doing a lot, keep an eye out for them staying inside of the Storm. So I think that's a key element to their success.
Mini Miner, should Pablo and Chino be a little bit worried about the zones not going their way, given that they did have that off game when it didn't yesterday?
Well, I mean, we expected a bit of a chaotic day for them, and I suppose they didn't bring that yesterday there. You know, the way that they performed throughout the majors so far, it was a bit rocky. They had some good performances. They showed signs of life, and then it just wasn't necessarily that consistent. But yesterday, they actually had the exact same average placement as Sky and Scroll. I said it yesterday. They almost played a lot like a Sky and Scroll sort of match history, and it was very impressive. But I think it's the sort of thing that we can expect from this Team 11. But as Frankie correctly said, when they didn't get the zone, that probably is going to be their problem today if they don't get zones again.
Yeah, definitely could be something to worry about for them. But I think, you know, what fills me with confidence is what they did showcase when they made it to end games yesterday was that these guys have the power needed to find success. I'd argue I'd want to see a bit more from them, right? You know, they had the same exact average placement than Sky and Scroll had, but they actually were averaging lesser limbs, which I think most people maybe wouldn't expect out of those two, right? You almost expect these guys to have a bit more firepower, a bit more aggressive in those moments to get more limbs. So hopefully they can show us that side of their game today.
Well, Levin, now you've mentioned aggression, it's made me think of Size and Scary, because similar to Pablo and Chino, right? They actually had some great zones. They land at Swift Shard, but they were putting up a fantastic fight as well.
I think these guys are the perfect example of, like, you know, a team who, yes, does get lucky, but really grabs at the opportunity, Vinny. I mean, there were so many situations where, like, these guys were put in positions where you could go, yeah, they got a good zone here and there, you know, they got a nice pullback on one of the half and half zones, but then they would just fight people and be aggressive, and they weren't playing scared. They weren't playing like a team who maybe doesn't have grand experience or doesn't have much expectation for themselves. They were just playing the day of their lives.
Yeah, it's right. And I think, you know, we obviously say, yeah, they got great zones yesterday. They got really lucky, I guess you could say, in that regard. But it's almost very easy to say that that was the reason for their success. But they also had to take that advantage. They had to take the opportunity that was given to them in those zones. And we often see teams that maybe are a little bit further down, less experienced in this situation, not taking advantage of those situations. But they played really, really well yesterday. They had the most amount of eliminations. They had the most amount of damage dealt as well yesterday. So a team that's on fire right now.
Another team that we're expecting to hopefully do well today, potentially come top 2, is Thomas and Focus Mini Miner, and they are landing on the west side of the map, Riptide, and they had a solid performance yesterday, but I think we can see more from them.
Oh, we can definitely see more from them. I think they, you know, of course, got very unlucky with the zones. They didn't get a single one. They almost had the worst day possible when it came to zones. They actually had the furthest distance traveled out of all of our teams yesterday, and they also took the most storm damage. So I think that sort of just paints the picture of how their day went. But they still managed to find success level, which is absolutely key. But I don't think they were too happy about those zones yesterday.
No, they weren't. And actually, shout out to Boop, because Thomas was in Boop's chat after the 6 games, and he literally said, if I got the zones that Pablo and Chino had, we're winning FNCS tomorrow. Like, just give us the zones. So I am hoping that they do get some zones. You know, I know Zeke over on NA, he actually controls all the zones in Fortnite, if you guys didn't know that. So hopefully Zeke can give Thomas some favorable zones today, and we can see if he can back his words.
Yeah, he should be sending, as should all the pro players be sending lovely words to Zeke as they head to the lobby. Let's chat though about the changes to Net Surge or Storm Surge. It's become Net Surge, I should say, for the season. It's clearly made an impact on all the players in the lobby. Some are coping better than others. And Mini Miner, can you talk to us actually about some of the changes that we've seen?
Yeah, so for those that don't know, the way the Storm Surge used to operate was total amount of damage that you dealt. It didn't take into account the amount of damage that you've taken. Now, this was the numbers from the 2025 Global Championships, and this was the damage ratio from, of course, our top 5 finish at those Global Championships. And you can see the numbers, you know, a lot of teams in this top 5, majority of them had that positive damage ratio. But I want you to remember that first place team, 1.31 damage ratio, quite low when you compare it to what's coming up. What did happen, I should say, yesterday in this season.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, you look at the damage ratios here, and there's much more of an importance on actually having a positive damage ratio. It's not possible to have, you know, players or teams who have negative damage ratios and are finding success, right? It just goes against the nature of how the mechanic works. And again, you see the direct translation of this. Sky and Stroll, the team we've been saying has been the best most consistent team. They are the best when it comes to keeping their damage ratio high, right? They don't take much damage, but they're able to get damage off on other players at a very, very high clip. So it's good to see that. It's interesting to see how that unfolds over now. As far as adjustments that need to be made from there.
Well, there are a lot of heroes who are looking to make some changes as we head into the last 6 games. So let's hear from Taka and Takata, because I'm interested to hear their thoughts on yesterday's action.
One thing's always going to be clear whenever it comes to a 2-day format, and that's the fact, Takata, that we know all of these duos have likely been hitting the VODs, especially those teams that were struggling to net surge. Here today, they have the opportunity to make some of those adaptations that Levinet just kind of referenced.
And I'm hoping that we see it. We could maybe see more sneaky plays, even some of the most aggressive players who had a difficult tournaments all over the world, not just in EU, but looking here, players like Sharkantini. I mean, these are incredibly aggressive players, and when you taking damage as much as doing it, I'm curious to see what mix-ups we see. Even from Swizzy, we saw him practicing the off so I'm hoping to see a little bit more sneaky action, a little bit more kind of net surge focus plays, and then there's even duos like Darm and Demish who are kind of dropping all over the map. I think their most recent drop was Hills, but they started somewhere else, and they've just been mixing it up throughout the whole day.
It's not really that surprising though to see Darm and Demish going on tour. What happened at TikTok Terrace after all, Takata. But for right now, we got to get back to the desk to see what else they've got to say.
Thank you so much, guys. Now, it's not just about becoming the Major 1 champions today. It's also about qualifying for the Major 1 Summit, the PSD Bank Dome in Dusseldorf. And there are a lot of teams who are feeling very satisfied in the top 10 right now, feeling fairly secure, but anything can change. However, one thing that does have to change is the focus of some of our duos who are sitting outside the top 20 right now. So if we head to page 3, we'll see iDrop and Marius sat in 30th. Yeah, we're not looking at them to win, but hopefully, Levin, they can change things up enough to make more impact, because I feel like we barely saw them yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, you want to expect that from these guys, especially if you're Marius, right? Right now, it's looking like a Danish.
זה רשום לי. אני פגעתי בך כולה 38 בטעות. די, מי זה הפרועים האלה? מי זה הפאקינג פרועים?
Ultimately, you want to see Marius sort of step up. You want to see him take things into his own hands. But it's a tough situation for them, Mini, right? Going back and watching a lot of their games, they're just having a tough time at Latte. There's so many different teams that I felt like were just sort of roughing them up all over the POI. Players coming in, camping buildings, players on the outside, you know, taking shots at them when they had less favorable buff paths. And their game's just rough. And so hopefully they can sort of get a grip on things and figure things out. But ultimately, you know, I reckon they're going to be in for another tough day.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been even worse for them as well. They had 4th place in that last game, which was when that zone, of course, pulled all the way up to Latte, so they could have been in a much worse situation. But thankfully for them, they clutched up there, so hopefully they can bring that momentum into today.
Yes. Akira and Karama, our gentle mates, French representatives, they're definitely going to be disappointed with yesterday's performance. Everything seemed to be going wrong for these guys, but there was a good reason for that.
Yeah, after game number 3, they were contested by Serena and Pixovsky down towards the south of that Phrygian Fortress area that they were landing, and that really makes things difficult, Evan. When you are sort of, you know, a team of this caliber, a team that everyone's expecting to do well, then you start going down off spawn, you start having some troubles, then leaving that drop spot, it just changes things up so much. So now for a team that a lot of people would have expected to be in the top 10, maybe even the top 5, they're looking at just about hopefully making it into the top 20.
Yeah, it's really hard for them in that situation, especially because there were some games where, like, they lost your spawn, but one of them would survive. And so you have the ability to revive your teammate, but we know how hard it can be when you're landing at a spot that's central to then have to completely switch up your idea about how you're going to play the game and recover the game. It's not going to be easy for them, but we'll have to see if they even stay contested, right? Because the team ended up leaving some of the last game, so they'll definitely be hoping that they can survive. I'm looking at this final page, Frankie, and it's hard to look at one of the teams here.
I'm gonna try and be optimistic about this. Could we see historical performance for the ages for Swizzy and Pixie? Attacker said they have been practicing their Osborne. They were looking for volunteers yesterday at 11. Is it too late for these guys to make it to land?
No, because it's probably going to need today, right? And we sort of have an estimate of like around 300 odd points in that sort of range. Can these guys sort of average 60 points per game over the course of 5 games? I think they probably could, Minnie. It's going to take a lot though, because they really struggled off spawn here at Dark Dominion. Even when they weren't having problems with Truly, they were having problems here underneath the POI with teams sort of rotating in. You can see them getting snuck up on. You had Hydro and Kaito for 9 and Moneymaker constantly sneaking in the tunnels and stealing some of their loot from underground and just sandwiching them in. It was really rough and really nasty at times. I don't know what to expect at all, because I don't see what changes.
Yeah, well, now they have the context of what happened in day 1. Hopefully they can sort of learn from that, right? They're 2 very good players. You'd expect them to be winning those fights, but,
well, if you're a Swizzy and Pixie fan, send them your best, because we are ready to board the battle bus. It's time for Game 7 with Taco and Takata.
Thank you guys so much, and I think what's really exciting about Takata is all of the speculation surrounding it. It's not just 20 teams that are going to be confirming for this Major 1 Summit land. We gotta see what happens first, because Game 7 is ready to go.
38 HP
Despite my bias being from Spain, I would like to see some West zones today. I want to see, the teams at the top prove that it's not all zones. They have the experience and skills needed to continue that place. And I'd like to see them prove it. Regarding kind of the early game that we were alluding to, you were saying he's been practicing Osborns?
After yesterday's matches, it comes as no surprise that they were interested in looking towards those Osborns. But what I'm interested in right now is Wonky Land. Things were really starting to heat up yesterday. Sharktini definitely falling short of the expectations that the entire community and those even outside of EU had sort of placed upon these two. And whether you could argue that's just Huddy and Fish having really, ticked all the boxes and doing their homework, making sure that they came super prepared to try and overthrow Sharktini from the POI. But this has been a conversation that started in the off-season, and it's not going to stop anytime soon here today. Sharktini, though, gathered a little bit of their bearings around them. Teeny kind of just waiting for the prime opportunity to strike. Looking for some of those opening shots, opening blows. Tags there onto Fishy, but still not enough for him to feel comfortable trying to go in for the full on
We saw a lot of confidence coming from Sharktini, not just in these major finals, but Cups, scrims, all sorts of opportunities where they kind of have a chance to take those 1v1s.
אני ראיתי את הסקין שלך
Barcelona, you those surprise contested situations. Nathan, this is just an excellent review here of how Nathan was able to clutch things up for him and his duo.
אתה הרגת אותי.
אני מתתי בזמן שאמרת, דיברת.
Those opening eliminations, it still bodes pretty well for their net surge overall, and Dawn, I think, are another one of those teams where you never really know what their next move is going to be. The only thing that's for certain right now is but game is game, and sometimes for pros, you have to make those on-the-fly adaptations, and one big thing is their strategy just really seems to be reminiscent of that OG Nishatini strat, where they're the ones that are looking for those ambush attacks on teams, interrupting their loot pads, and they're very confident fighters, and they had about half their matches yesterday where they really got into 12th place heading into today, which is pretty impressive given when you don't actually have a home to call your own.
I was gonna say comfortably in the top 20, but the difference between 12 and 20 is not much at all. Cutoff is currently 153 points for top 20. The estimates we were saying around 250 to 300. But let's see.
אבל אשכרה יש לך את יובל שאומר לך שאני פאקינג מתתי באותו זמן.
אוקיי, אני גם לך שאכפת לי. אני רוצה לראות שמצאת באותו זמן.
Now that they've been spotted out and the noise has been made.
אתה יודע מה סבבה, מה אכפת לי? סבבה, אתה יודע מה? אני איתך, אני הרגתי אותך. בסדר?
Given that Darm Demish, they did make an indication that they were interested in possibly contesting them pretty early on. But it's lobby conditioning after all. For Darm Demish, everybody's got to be on their toes, never really know what to expect from these two, aside from the fact that they're willing to get scrappy. They're going to have to duke it out here now. Rosie's trying to see if he can get a separate angle of approach here. Just going to reconvene with this duo, though. Sharktini, on the other hand, they're ready to strike. Wonkyland really starting to heat up already here in Game 7. Teeny looking for the immediate approach. Here's the thing, Teeny and Shark, Buddy and Fishy, they stole your POI. They stole your placement yesterday. I mean, they played the worst card on these guys. And now they're trying to take their chain back. Wonkyland has to be established. And for Sharktini, you know that they want to call it their own, but as long as Huddy and Fishy exist in the lobbies that they are also participants to, it's just not going to be easy.
This is a big match for both of these players, and there's not any all-out aggression coming through. The issue is they can't fully split it either. We're seeing how that goes. Darm Demish, though, have picked up Darkos. There was a lot of third parties in the surrounding area, but from what I'm seeing, it looks like they might have
אני
just
פאקינג בקרב.
נו, כן, אתה ראית אותי.
די, יובל.
Looking by himself. Scary inside.
גם אותי את
Part
המשהו.
of the reason why Darman Demish left the actual vicinity of Builder's Barracks, because third-party intervention is always going to be a prime issue for every single one of these duos. Scary. I'm trying to see if he can get the wraparound. The confidence, though, really starting to showcase itself after yesterday. Hard to also forget what took place. Inside nearly had one of the most insane solo clutches that we've ever seen in a finals lobby, but Azet just tinkering around these lower layers. Oh, we're really left for him to run, though. He's kind of just getting pinched from both Scary and Saya, separate angles of approach.
2v1. Shouldn't be long before Saya Scary closes off, but I don't want to jinx anything. Both players are now cracked. It's a 1v1 as that has completely turned this fight around. Syas trying to sneak his way out. Just one build left. And Scary now has a lot more pressure on his shoulder.
Oh, no. It just doesn't matter. Azet defends home base, and that is going to be a detrimental blow already to our third place team on the leaderboard. When you talk about the metrics, the ripple effects, it makes it so much more feasible for somebody in forward like Bikup Halabu could overtake. But looking at these initial opening shots, that was just a nasty opener from Azet, but the fact that he was able to even break through in the first place in that 1 versus 2, Zayas and Scary, they had the right idea, just the wrong execution.
You just cannot be losing those 2v1s, especially in the early game. If you're looking to get not only a top 3, I mean, this was contenders coming up on top, and I mean, the zone was even pulling towards them once again. So much confidence after day 1, the performance of their lives, and now a rough start to day 2. Hopefully they can just forget about it and move on. They still have 5 more matches today. Sharktini's still here in Wonderland.
I'll tell you one thing, that's the problem, Takata, still here. We're in the third zone, and there is yet to be a conclusion formed between who's actually coming out on top for this off spawn. And granted, Wonkyland is one of those POIs that you can split and still see both duos have a...
At the end of the day, you know that's not what either of these teams are interested in. There is so much pride riding on the line here right now, and for 13 especially.